when I caught my president on my doorbell camera, literally ripping open my packages like a starving animal. I knew I was about to end her HOA reign of terror forever. There's Brenda Thornfield, 50-something real estate predator, with her perfectly shellacked blonde hair and gaudy pearl earrings, standing on my porch at 2 p.m., stealing medical supplies meant for my diabetic father. The vicious rip of cardboard tears through my security footage, like fingernails on a chalkboard, followed by her venomous, just worthless medical garbage, as she hurls insulin pumps back into the torn box. That package theft child's play. What I uncovered next was an $8-year million-dollar embezzlement conspiracy that had been systematically robbing every family in our neighborhood blind, and the final package I left for her. It contained evidence that would destroy her life and send her to federal prison for decades. What would you do if your HOA president was stealing life-saving medication from elderly residents? Drop your rage in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Corrupt HOA tyrants are apparently a global epidemic. My name is Marcus Holloway, and 6 months ago, I thought my biggest problem was explaining to my kids why daddy wasn't living at home anymore. Turns out a brutal divorce, where my ex-wife's forensic accounting skills cleaned out half my savings, was just the opening act for the real nightmare waiting in suburban Tennessee. After 22 years of marriage imploded like a controlled demolition, I packed my life into a U-Haul and moved to Willowbrook Estates, one of those picture-perfect planned communities where every lawn looks manicured by Swiss watchmakers and the HOA fees cost more than most people's rent. As an IT consultant specializing in financial systems, I should have recognized the red flags. But when you're bleeding money from divorce attorneys and custody battles, even overpriced suburbia looks like salvation. The smell of fresh paint and Tennessee humidity hung heavy in my new 4-bedroom house when I moved my father in. Harold Holloway, 73, diabetic and tougher than a $2 steak, had volunteered to help with the transition. Son, he said, unpacking his daily insulin supplies with hands that trembled just slightly. Sometimes life knocks you flat so you can learn what really matters. His medications arrived by mail every week. Insurance company requirements meant $300 shipments of pump supplies, glucose monitors, and emergency medications. The metallic click of his glucose meter became our new daily soundtrack, a constant reminder of what we couldn't afford to lose. Willowbrook Estates looked like a suburban magazine cover story. 47 houses starting at $400,000, arranged around common areas where sprinkler systems ticked like expensive metronomes. The $200 monthly HOA fees bought you access to a 47-page covenant document that basically gave the board authority over everything from doormat collars to how many seconds your car could idle in the driveway. Enter Brenda Thornfield, suburban predator disguised as a helpful neighbor. Picture a real estate shark who learned customer service from a collections agency. Blonde hair shellacked into submission, pearl earrings that caught sunlight like tiny weapons, and fingernails so sharp they could probably perform surgery. She drove a white Lexus SUV parked diagonally across 2 spaces and lived in the neighborhood's crown jewel corner lot on Magnolia Circle. 3-car garage front yard that could host PGA tournaments. Her husband Gerald was a successful dentist, which explained the lifestyle. 2 kids in private school, country club membership, and enough disposable income to treat HOA meetings like personal board meetings. Dorothy Vance, the sweet-faced widow who served as HOA secretary, followed Brenda around like a loyal spaniel, taking meeting minutes with the precision of a court stenographer. The first incident happened 3 weeks after moving in. Dad's insulin pump supplies, a critical $300 shipment, vanished from our porch 2 hours after delivery. My new doorbell camera showed FedEx delivering at 10 o'clock. Then at noon there was Brenda examining the package label like she was reading a restaurant menu. She shook the box, tilted her head with predatory curiosity, then tucked it under her arm and strolled away like she owned the place, which, according to her interpretation of HOA authority, she basically did. I found the empty box in the community dumpster that evening, medical supplies gone cardboard, shredded like Christmas wrapping. The taste of pure rage, metallic and bitter, filled my mouth as I marched to her front door with the empty box in hand. Oh, that abandoned package. Brenda's laugh sounded like wind chimes made of broken glass. HOA safety policy requires package retrieval within 24 hours. Sweetie, I was protecting our community from liability issues. She produced a laminated sheet showing subsection 12.7c. Her manicured nails tapping the paper like tiny hammers. Problem was, I'd read every page of our actual covenant. There was no subsection 12.7c. There wasn't even a section 12.7. When I demanded an HOA meeting to clarify these mysterious package policies, Brenda scheduled it for Tuesday at 2 p.m., when normal people were. The only attendees were Brenda, Dorothy and me, sitting at a folding table that reeked of industrial disinfectant infectant, the result of brand new emergency safety policy, requiring packages to be secured within 4 hours of delivery, violation fees $50 first offense, 100 203 after that, covenant violation proceedings, which sounded like a death sentence with legal paperwork. Dad's daily medication deliveries had just become a $50 lottery ticket every time I left the house. 2 days after that disastrous HOA meeting, Brenda launched what I can only describe as a suburban surveillance state, with herself as dictator-in-chief. She appointed herself neighborhood safety coordinator, a title that appeared nowhere in our HOA documents, but somehow gave her permission to patrol the streets like a middle-aged mall cop with delusions of grandeur. Her white Lexus became a familiar sight, cruising past my house at precisely 2 p.m. and 4 p.m., the exact times when most deliveries arrive. The woman had turned package monitoring into a full-time job. She created a WhatsApp group called Willowbrook Package Security Network. That was really just a digital gossip chain where she could coordinate her surveillance efforts with other bored residents. The constant ping of notifications from her phone during our conversations sounded like a slot machine hitting jackpot. But I wasn't just going to sit there and take it like some suburban punching bag. First, I did what any self-respecting consultant would do. I researched the hell out of Tennessee HOA law. My ex-wife's forensic accounting background had rubbed off on me during the divorce. I'd learned to dig through legal documents like a detective. What I discovered made my blood sing with vindication. HOA boards can't just invent new rules whenever they feel like it. Any rule changes require 30 days written notice to all residents, followed by a formal vote. Brenda's emergency safety policy was about as legally binding as a grocery list written in crayon. In Tennessee, rules created without proper notice and voting are completely unenforceable in court, something I plan to use against her. I filed a formal complaint with the Tennessee HOA Regulatory Board, $25 online 30-day response guarantee. Then I installed 2 additional security cameras positioned legally on my own property, covering every angle of my front porch and driveway. Finally, I updated delivery instructions for all packages. Ring doorbell, wait for signature. Do not leave unattended. Brenda's response was swift and predictably psychotic. She escalated to claiming my security cameras were invading neighbor privacy and creating a hostile environment. Never mind that they were positioned on my own property and only covered my own driveway. She organized a petition among neighbors demanding I remove them, going door to door with her clipboard like a political canvasser from hell. The petition felt cheap when she handed it to me, obviously printed at home with smudged ink that rubbed off on my fingers like newsprint. She'd managed to collect 12 signatures from our 34-household community, mostly from newer residents who didn't know better, and older folks intimidated by her aggressive approach. 12 signatures, Marcus, she announced, standing on my porch wearing that predatory smile. The community has spoken. Those cameras are a violation of neighborhood harmony. That's when everything changed. While reviewing my security footage to document Brenda's harassment campaign, I noticed something that made my stomach drop and my pulse quicken simultaneously. She wasn't just stealing my packages, she was hitting other houses too. The woman had turned our entire neighborhood into her personal shopping mall. My cameras caught her examining packages at Mrs. Shen's house, shaking boxes at the Rodriguez place, and actually walking away with a large Amazon delivery from the Thompson family's porch. Her method was diabolically brilliant. Open packages in her garage, Hero Alpha, anything valuable, then reseal the damaged boxes and deliver them back to the rightful owners, hours later claiming she'd found them damaged in the common area. I started creating an evidence folder with time stamps and video clips. The pattern was undeniable. Brenda Thornfield was running a neighborhood-wide theft ring right under everyone's noses, using her HOA position as cover for systematic larceny. The smell of her overwhelming perfume, expensive but cloying like flowers rotting in sugar, lingered in our shared mailroom after her patrol visits. And her nervous laugh when I started asking pointed questions about other residents' missing packages. It pitched higher than a dog whistle, revealing cracks in her perfect suburban facade. But the real game changer arrived by certified mail 2 weeks later. The Tennessee HOA Regulatory Board had not only invalidated Brenda's emergency rule, but opened a formal investigation into irregular rulemaking procedures at Willowbrook Estates. When that official notice required Brenda's signature, I watched through my camera as her hands actually shook while reading it. For the first time since moving to this suburban nightmare, the predator looked like prey. Her response was to schedule an emergency HOA meeting to address what she called a package theft crisis threatening our community. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The biggest package thief in the neighborhood calling a meeting about package theft. But here's where Brenda made her first major tactical error. She claimed I was harassing board members and threatening community safety. In the official meeting notice, she was positioning herself as the victim in a drama where she was clearly the villain. My father watched me printing evidence packets that evening, his weathered face thoughtful. Son Harold said quietly, organizing his insulin supplies with practiced precision. Sometimes the guilty make so much noise about innocence they forget everyone else can hear them lying. The old man was right. Brenda Thornfield had just declared war on the wrong neighborhood, and I had years of rage from a failed marriage to fuel this fight. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 7 p.m., prime time for maximum drama. Brenda had learned from her work hours mistake, but what she didn't anticipate was how many residents would show up to watch her character assassination attempt. The community center reek of stale coffee and industrial carpet cleaner as 23 homeowners filed in. The largest HOA meeting in Willowbrook's history. Brenda sat at the head table like a general preparing for battle, her usual pearl earrings replaced with diamond studs that caught the fluorescent lights like tiny weapons. Dorothy Vance shuffled papers beside her, stealing nervous glances at the crowd. Tonight we address a serious threat to our community, Brenda announced, their voice carrying that artificial sweetness that made my teeth ache. We have a problem resident who's been harassing board members and violating our peaceful way of life. She launched into a presentation worthy of a prosecutor. Security footage of my cameras, carefully edited to make them appear invasive. Photos of my suspicious, late-night visitors, actually clients picking up repaired computers, claims that my business violated residential zoning laws and attracted undesirable elements to our family neighborhood. Her voice climbed higher with each accusation, like a soprano hitting notes only dogs could hear, while her perfume grew more overwhelming with nervous perspiration. But I'd learned presentation skills during my corporate days, and my ex-wife's forensic accounting background had taught me the power of irrefutable evidence. When Brenda finished her character assassination, I stood up and calmly connected my laptop to the room's projector. Interesting interpretation, I said, but I prefer unedited footage. The room fell silent as I played crystal clear video of Brenda stealing packages from 3 different houses, her predatory examination of shipping labels, Mrs. Chen's arthritis medication disappearing into Brenda's garage, the Rodriguez family's anniversary gift vanishing under her arm, each time stamp clearly visible, each theft undeniable. You could hear a pin drop. Then Mrs. Chen's voice, trembling but determined, that's my medicine. I waited 2 weeks for insurance to approve it. James Rodriguez stood up, his military bearing rigid with controlled fury. She took our 25th anniversary gift, told us neighborhood teenagers probably stole it. The texture of silence shifted from confusion to betrayal as 23 pairs of eyes locked onto Brenda, like targeting systems. But Brenda Thornfield didn't become HOA dictator by folding under pressure. These videos are obviously fabricated, she declared, her voice cracking. Marcus has the technical skills to create deepfakes. This is exactly the harassment I've been warning about. She pivoted faster than a politician during scandal season. He's surveilling our entire neighborhood, violating privacy, probably selling our personal information to criminals. Then came her nuclear option. I filed complaints with Adult Protective Services about elder abuse in his household. Elderly residents have contacted me about concerning sounds and neglect. My blood turned to ice. Harold sat in the back row, medication bag in his lap, suddenly looking fragile under the harsh lights. The accusation that I was abusing the man who'd sacrificed his independence to help me rebuild my life felt like being stabbed with frozen steel. During my divorce, I learned that mail theft is a federal crime. Each stolen package can carry up to 5 years in prison and $250,000 fines. But false apps reports, that was psychological warfare, using government agencies as weapons. You filed false reports about my father's care. My voice carried across the room like thunder. Concerned residents have duties to report suspicious situations, Brenda replied, but her manicured hands trembled slightly. Elderly people are often too frightened to speak up. The room split like a fault line. Older residents on fixed incomes, who'd suffered under Brenda's arbitrary fees, stared at her with disgust. But newer, wealthier residents shifted uncomfortably, worried about property values if corruption scandals hit local news. Dorothy Vance looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair, caught between loyalty and conscience, as the lies piled higher around her. The next morning brought the mini twist that changed everything. APS investigator Janet Morrison arrived expecting to find neglect, but instead discovered Harold's meticulous medication charts, pristine living conditions, and obvious mutual respect between us. Mr. Holloway, she said quietly, this is exemplary elder care. Whoever reported this wasted everyone's time. Then she dropped the bombshell. We've had 3 similar false reports from this address range in 2 years. Someone's weaponizing our system. As she left, I realized Brenda's pattern. Challenge her authority, face government investigation. She turned federal and state agencies into her personal enforcement squad, destroying lives with fabricated complaints. But Janet's revelation gave me something more valuable than vindication. It gave me evidence of systematic abuse of authority. My ex-wife had, Moa always said, financial predators couldn't help following patterns, and Brenda had just revealed hers. The community fracture was widening, media attention was building, and Brenda Thornfield had escalated from petty theft to using government agencies as weapons. She'd just picked a fight with someone who knew how to debug corrupt systems. 3 days after that APS investigator left, shaking her head at Brenda's false accusations, I was served with legal papers at 6 p.m. by a process server who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. Brenda had escalated to full legal warfare, filing for a protective order, claiming I was stalking and harassing her. The paperwork felt heavier than it should have weighted, with expensive legal threats that could bankrupt a recently divorced consultant. She'd hired Davidson and Associates, Nashville's most ruthless litigation firm, using what I strongly suspected were HOA funds rather than her own money. The real gut punch was the covenant violation proceedings, 15 separate infractions ranging from unauthorized business activity to installation of surveillance equipment without board approval. Each violation carried a $200 fine, total demand $3,000, due immediately or face a lien on my house. During my consultation with Tennessee HOA attorney Rebecca Martinez, I learned something that made my pulse quicken. In Tennessee, HOA board members must disclose any financial conflicts of interest and recuse themselves from related votes. Violations constitute embezzlement and fraud. More importantly, I could file an Americans with Disabilities Act accommodation request for my father's medical deliveries, which would legally override any package restrictions Brenda imposed. Mr. Holloway, Rebecca said, pulling public records. Your HOA has paid $15,000 in legal fees this year, all to the same firm now representing Miss Thornfield personally. That's textbook embezzlement. But while I was gathering legal ammunition, Brenda made her most desperate move yet. The violations hearing was scheduled with a kangaroo court consisting entirely of her supporters, neighbor Patricia Wells Golf, buddy Sandra Martinez, and book club friend Jennifer Adams. They'd meet in Patricia's living room, neutral ground that smelled like vanilla, candles, and predetermined guilt. However, my counterpunch was already in motion. I'd filed my ADA accommodation request the day before, legally requiring that to modify package policies for my father's medical needs. Brenda couldn't find me for something federal law required her to allow. The mini twist came 3 days before the hearing when Dorothy Vance approached me at the grocery store, her cart full of anxiety purchases, ice cream, wine, and stress baking supplies. The poor woman looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Marcus, she whispered in the produce aisle, glancing around like we were in a spy movie. I need to show you something my husband left me. Insurance files, I think. Brenda's been stealing from everyone. That evening Dorothy arrived, carrying a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. Her hand shook as she spread documents across my kitchen table while Harold made tea and pretended not to eavesdrop. I've been documenting everything since my husband died, she said quietly. He discovered discrepancies but couldn't prove them, made me promise to find someone who could. The documents revealed systematic financial fraud spanning 3 years. Brenda had been billing personal expenses to the spa visits as community outreach, restaurant meals as board development, her Lexus maintenance as transportation costs. But the smoking gun was correspondence with Pinnacle Development Group, Brenda's plan to sell 5 empty community lots to her cousin's construction company. She's been artificially inflating HOA fees to fund improvements that only benefit these lots. Dorothy explained, her voice strengthening with each revelation. Higher fees increase property values. She's stealing from every homeowner to increase her personal profit, estimated at $2.8 million. The smell of Harold's chamomile tea mixed with musty paperwork as we absorbed the magnitude. This wasn't petty theft anymore, it was organized financial conspiracy, involving family members and shell companies. Community pressure was building too. Mrs. Chen had started talking to neighbors about her stolen medicine. James Rodriguez was asking pointed questions about HOA finances at the local VFW. Kim Thompson, a single mom with journalism background, had begun documenting resident complaints on social media. The protective order hearing loomed Monday morning. If I lost, I'd be banned from approaching my own HOA president, forced to remove security cameras, and liable for $3,000 in fabricated fines. Worse, it would silence any resident who dared question Brenda's authority. But Dorothy's evidence had transformed everything. Armed with proof of systematic embezzlement and federal aid law backing my father's needs, I finally had weapons to match Brenda's legal arsenal. Harold watched me organize evidence files late into the night, his weathered hand steady as he helped sort financial documents. Son, he said quietly, your ex-wife taught you to follow money during the divorce. Time to use that education. He was right. My crash course in forensic accounting had taught me to spot financial manipulation, and Brenda's scheme was written in black and white across dozens of fraudulent invoices. The woman who'd escalated from stealing insulin supplies to wielding government agencies as weapons had unknowingly handed me the evidence to expose a corruption network threatening every family in Willowbrook. Monday morning, Brenda would discover some legal packages contain exactly what corrupt officials deserve. The night before my protective order hearing, Dorothy arrived at my house carrying a box that would change everything. Her hands trembled as she set it on my kitchen table, the cardboard worn from years of careful storage. These are the original HOA and corporation papers from 2016, she whispered, glancing toward the window like Brenda might be watching. My husband was the founding treasurer, and take copies of everything. As I opened the box, the smell of old paper and faded ink filled the room. Harold leaned forward in his chair, his medication routine forgotten, as we uncovered the smoking gun that would destroy Brenda's empire. The incorporation documents revealed something that made my blood run cold. Brenda and Gerald Thornfield weren't just HOA board members. They were co-founders of Willowbrook Estates itself. Through a shell company called Magnolia Holdings LLC, they retained development rights to 5 empty lots scattered throughout our community. Look at this, Dorothy said, pulling out a manila folder stuffed with financial projections. She's been planning this for 8 years. The scheme was diabolically brilliant. Brenda had been systematically inflating HOA fees under the guise of community improvements. New sidewalks, upgraded landscaping, premium mailboxes. But every improvement was strategically positioned to benefit only her 5 retained lots artificially, boosting their property values for eventual sale. The numbers were staggering. Conservative estimates showed she could sell the lots to Pinnacle Development, her cousin's construction company, for $2.8 million. Her initial investment, roughly $300,000, funded by 8 years of excessive HOA fees stolen from every homeowner in Willowbrook. Tennessee law requires board members to disclose any financial conflicts of interest, I said, my background helping me process the legal implications. She's been voting on fee increases that directly benefit her personal investments. That's not just embezzlement, it's fraud. Dorothy nodded grimly. Every HOA decision she's made was tainted by undisclosed financial interests. Every fee increase, every improvement project, every rule change designed to drive away residents who might investigate. The insurance angle made everything worse. Willowbrook's liability policy specifically excluded coverage for fraudulent acts by board members. If Brenda's scheme was exposed, the HOA faced personal liability for all legal costs and restitution. Every homeowner could be individually liable for her crimes. That's why she's been so aggressive about silencing opposition. I realized Mrs. Shen, the Rodriguez family, anyone who questioned finances, she had to discredit them before they discovered the truth. Harold's weathered hand shook slightly as he examined architectural plans showing the lot development timeline. Son, this woman's been playing a long game, using everyone's money to make herself rich while destroying anyone who got too close to the truth. Dorothy's voice cracked as she revealed her deepest motivation. My husband discovered discrepancies in the books 3 months before he died. He couldn't prove anything, but he made me promise to keep documenting. Said someone would eventually connect the dots. The evidence quality was overwhelming. Bank records showing Magnolia Holdings payments, email chains between Brenda and Pinnacle Development discussing construction timelines, Recorded phone calls. Tennessee's one-party consent law had allowed Dorothy to document Brenda's increasingly frantic conversations about problem residents and financial exposure. But the revelation created a moral dilemma that kept me awake until dawn. I now had evidence to destroy Brenda completely, but exposing her scheme could bankrupt innocent neighbors. The insurance exclusion meant every Willowbrook resident might face individual liability for her decades of fraud. As Dorothy packed up the evidence, she handed me one final document, a handwritten note from her late husband. If something happens to me, make sure Dorothy knows the truth about the development deal. The community deserves better than greed disguised as governance. The protective order hearing was 8 hours away. I had enough evidence to send Brenda to federal prison for decades, but I needed a strategy that would protect the community while delivering justice. My father's evening medication routine provided clarity. Watching him carefully measure insulin, while surrounded by evidence of Brenda's greed, I realized what mattered most: protecting vulnerable people from predators who abuse positions of trust. Brenda Thornfield had turned our quiet suburb into her personal ATM. But she'd made one critical error. She targeted a recently divorced consultant who'd learned forensic accounting the hard way and had nothing left to lose. Tomorrow morning the package thief would discover what happens when you steal from the wrong neighborhood. The protective order hearing was 8 hours away, but I wasn't going to court empty-handed. That night I converted my spare bedroom into a war room that would have impressed federal prosecutors, with financial documents papering every wall and timeline charts mapping 8 years of systematic fraud. Dorothy arrived at midnight, carrying coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and 3 boxes of additional evidence she'd hidden in her attic. The musty smell of old paperwork mixed with Harold's evening medications, as he declared himself chief evidence organizer, attacking the task with military precision despite arthritic hands. The legal strategy required surgical precision. Rebecca Martinez had outlined 3 paths during our emergency consultation: criminal referral for embezzlement, civil suit for damages, or HOA dissolution to protect residents from liability. In Tennessee, dissolving a corrupt HOA requires 67% homeowner approval and court oversight, but it voids fraudulent board decisions and protects residents from individual liability for board member crimes. Exactly what our community needed. My background proved invaluable for digital forensics. Brenda had been sloppy with electronic evidence, treating HOA emails like personal communication. Her correspondence with Pinnacle Development revealed construction timelines, profit-sharing agreements, and casual discussions about removing problematic residents who asked inconvenient questions. But I wasn't fighting alone. The coalition that emerged surprised everyone, especially Brenda. Mrs. Chen arrived at dawn, carrying homemade dumplings that filled the house with savory aromas and stories of 8 years of intimidation. She'd been systematically fined whenever she questioned board decisions. Her fixed income slowly led dry by Brenda's creative violations. James Rodriguez brought military logistics expertise and a veteran's understanding of corruption. Same pattern as supply chain fraud overseas, he said, grimly studying financial records, inflated contracts, family kickbacks, whistleblower intimidation. Kim Thompson's journalism background proved crucial for media strategy. She'd been documenting resident complaints on social media, building digital evidence trails. Her press kit identified investigative reporters specializing in municipal corruption, with clear narrative structure and supporting documentation. Dorothy coordinated using her secretary access, feeding real-time intelligence while maintaining cover. The sound of her nervous highlighter squeaking across documents became our planning soundtrack, punctuated by her stress baking timer chiming every hour. The evidence portfolio exceeded expectations. Dorothy's husband had created backup systems documenting every suspicious transaction. Digital recovery revealed deleted emails, financial records, and timelines, correlating fee increases with Brenda's development plans. Counterintelligence became essential. We tracked Brenda's lawyer meetings through public parking records, monitored HOA schedules for surprise votes, and Dorothy fed false information to test for leaks, a trick my ex-wife had used during divorce proceedings. Media timing required delicate coordination. Kim's contacts included Nashville reporters specializing in suburban corruption, but premature exposure could allow evidence destruction or asset flight. We needed simultaneous legal and media pressure to prevent escape routes. Technical preparation felt like debugging corrupt software. I created encrypted team communications, established evidence backup systems, and programmed automated releases if anyone faced retaliation. The methodical process was personally satisfying. Finally using my skills for justice instead of corporate profits. Psychological profiling revealed Brenda's weaknesses, public embarrassment and control loss. Dorothy's insider knowledge proved invaluable. She understood Brenda's social status, insecurities, and predicted increasingly desperate behavior under pressure. The timing was perfect. Election year made corruption exposure politically valuable for Tennessee's Attorney General. Tax season created financial disclosure pressure. The annual HOA meeting in 6 weeks provided a natural community deadline. The master stroke was my bait package. Irresistible electronics packaging containing GPS trackers, hidden cameras and legal documents. Harold suggested the trap with characteristic wisdom. Sometimes you give people exactly enough rope to hang themselves, son. We prepared for every contingency. If the protective order succeeded, I'd lose my security cameras and face harassment charges. If it failed, Brenda would escalate to more desperate measures. Either way, our evidence collection was complete, legal strategy finalized and media contacts ready. The war room's fluorescent lighting buzzed overhead as we made final preparations. The sharp ozone smell, mixing with coffee and determination. Financial documents covered every surface like evidence wallpaper, each sheet representing another family Brenda had victimized. As dawn broke, I realized this had evolved beyond personal revenge into community salvation. We weren't just stopping package theft, we were exposing systematic corruption, threatening every Willowbrook family. Harold organized the final evidence packets with shaking but determined hands. Your divorce taught you to follow money trails, he said quietly. Now you're using that education to protect people who can't protect themselves. The protective order hearing was in 4 hours, but instead of defending against fabricated charges, I was preparing to expose an entire criminal conspiracy. Kim loaded social media posts into scheduled releases. Dorothy practiced her testimony despite trembling hands. James coordinated witness statements with military efficiency. Brenda Thornfield thought she was silencing one troublesome resident. She was about to discover she declared war on an entire community, armed with 8 years of evidence and nothing left to lose. The protective order hearing didn't go the way Brenda expected. When Judge Patricia Hendricks reviewed my aid at accommodation filing and saw Dorothy's financial evidence, she dismissed Brenda's petition faster than a bat hook her hand. But instead of retreating, Brenda doubled down with the desperation of a cornered animal. Within hours of leaving the courthouse, she discovered that her high-powered attorney was under investigation by the Tennessee Bar Association for ethics violations, specifically using client funds for personal investments. The man who'd been her legal shield was suddenly radioactive, leaving Brenda exposed and panicking. Her response was to go nuclear. Brenda filed a false police report claiming I'd physically threatened her in the courthouse parking lot, complete with crocodile tears and a performance worthy of community theater. She planted evidence, a photo of my truck parked suspiciously near her house, taken during my legitimate grocery store trips to the nearby Kroger. Gerald, her dentist husband, reluctantly supported her story when police interviewed him, but his body language screamed discomfort. The man looked like he'd rather have root canal surgery than lie to law enforcement, his hands shaking as he signed the witness statement. The investigating officers found inconsistencies immediately. Security footage from the courthouse showed me leaving with Dorothy and heading straight home, nowhere near Brenda's Lexus. But they were required to take the report seriously, which meant more scrutiny on my family when we least needed it. While I dealt with police interviews and character assassination, my team continued evidence gathering like an underground resistance movement. Dorothy used her secretary position to monitor Brenda's increasingly frantic behavior, documenting late-night phone calls and mysterious bank visits. The GPS tracker I'd hidden in Dorothy's car, with her permission, revealed Brenda's desperation tour. 3 different banks in one afternoon, 2 attorney offices and a meeting with a crisis management consultant who specialized in reputation rehabilitation. The woman was liquidating assets and preparing damage control, like a war criminal facing tribunal. Community fractures became visible, battle lines. Anonymous flyers appeared overnight, claiming I was dangerous and mentally unstable, distributed to mailboxes under cover of darkness. Some residents began crossing streets to avoid Harold during his morning walks, their discomfort as palpable as morning fog. The smell of fear permeated neighborhood gatherings, that sharp metallic scent of people choosing sides in a conflict they didn't fully understand. Newer residents worried about property values rallied around Brenda's version of events. Long-term homeowners tired of arbitrary fees and harassment quietly supported my investigation, but Brenda's masterstroke of desperation was yet to come. The bait package I prepared, labeled vintage camera equipment, $4,500 value, disappeared from my porch exactly 3 hours after delivery. Hidden cameras captured every second of Brenda's compulsive theft. From her predatory examination of the shipping label to her satisfied walk back to her garage with stolen goods, what she discovered inside that package made her scream loud enough for neighbors to hear through closed windows. The box contained GPS trackers, a hidden camera, and a complete legal summons outlining her 8-year fraud scheme, signed by the Tennessee Attorney General's office. The documents included photos of her shell company and corporation, bank records showing embezzled funds, and a 48-hour deadline: resign and make full restitution or face federal criminal charges. The hidden camera captured her complete meltdown, throwing documents across her garage, calling Gerald with hysterical demands for immediate legal assistance, and attempting to destroy evidence by hurling the tracking device into her garbage disposal. She didn't realize the GPS system was already transmitting location data to servers beyond her reach. Her response was predictably unhinged. Brenda called an emergency HOA meeting to expel me from the community before the annual meeting could take place. She planned to push through a vote that would void my residency and eliminate the biggest threat to her empire. But Dorothy reported every detail of Brenda's plan to our team while Kim Thompson coordinated media alerts and James Rodriguez prepared witness statements. The emergency meeting would become Brenda's public execution instead of my exile. Local television news began investigating after Kim's press kit landed on the right desks. Channel 5's investigative team started asking pointed questions about HOA financial management and resident complaints of harassment. The pressure was mounting from every direction. Harold's health fluctuated under the stress, his diabetes requiring more careful monitoring, as neighborhood tension affected his sleep and appetite. The medicinal smell in our house grew stronger, a constant reminder of what we were fighting to protect. But the most dangerous development was Brenda's attempts to accelerate her development project. Desperate to cash out before criminal charges landed, she contacted Pinnacle Development to fast-track construction permits and begin lot sales immediately. My team intercepted communications revealing her exit strategy: liquidate the development deal, transfer proceeds to offshore accounts, and disappear before federal prosecution could begin. The woman who'd stolen packages was preparing to steal millions and vanish. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for Friday night. Brenda thought she was silencing her last major opponent. Instead, she was walking into a trap that would expose her crimes to the entire community and waiting media. The emergency HOA meeting was 3 days away when Brenda made her most desperate gamble yet. She tried to dissolve the entire HOA unilaterally to escape criminal liability. At 2 a.m. on Wednesday morning, she filed paperwork with Davidson County claiming a community safety emergency that required immediate HOA dissolution. Her legal theory was insane, but technically possible. If no HOA existed, no HOA crimes could have occurred. She planned to liquidate all association assets, pay herself administrative fees, and disappear with whatever remained. The paperwork trail revealed her scorched earth mentality. Bank records showed attempted wire transfers to Cayman Islands accounts. Her Lexus was listed for immediate sale. Most tellingly, Gerald's dental practice had quietly transferred ownership to a shell company registered in Delaware. A classic money laundering maneuver my ex-wife would have recognized instantly. But while Brenda was burning bridges, her own husband was building new ones. Gerald approached me at the Kroger grocery store Thursday morning, his face gray with exhaustion and guilt. Standing between cereal boxes and canned goods, he whispered the confession that changed everything. "She's been forging my signature on legal documents for 3 years," he said, his voice barely audible above the store's music. The development deal, the bank accounts, even my dental practice incorporation, I never signed any of it. He handed me a manila envelope containing photocopies of forged documents, bank statements showing money laundering through his practice, and recorded phone calls where Brenda discussed keeping Gerald ignorant of financial details. The man was providing evidence to destroy his own wife because his professional license and personal integrity meant more than marriage to a criminal. "I became a dentist to help people," Gerald said, his hands shaking as grocery cart wheels squeaked past us. "She turned my practice into a money laundering operation. I won't go to prison for her greed." That afternoon brought the medical crisis I'd been dreading. Harold collapsed during his evening medication routine, his blood sugar spiking from stress-induced complications. The emergency room doctor took one look at his test results and demanded immediate removal from any stressful environment. Sitting in the hospital waiting room, surrounded by the antiseptic smell of industrial cleaning supplies and the beeping of medical equipment, I faced an impossible choice. My father's health versus community justice. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead like angry insects as I watched Harold's fragile form connected to monitors. "Don't you dare quit Now son, monos, Harold whispered when I explained the doctor's orders, his weathered hand grip, mine with surprising strength. Justice matters more than comfort. Finish what we started. But Brenda's desperation had reached psychotic levels. That same night, vandalism, targeting my supporters, began, in earnest. Mrs. Chen's car was keyed, with deep scratches that caught streetlight like fresh wounds. James Rodriguez found his mailbox destroyed, metal twisted like modern art. Kim Thompson's front yard was spray-painted with obscenities that made the neighborhood look like a war zone. The attacks weren't random. Someone was systematically targeting every person who'd supported my investigation. Security footage showed figures in dark clothing, faces obscured, moving through the neighborhood like suburban guerrillas. The smell of spray paint lingered in morning air, mixing with fear and determination. Dorothy's courage moment came Friday morning when she decided to break cover completely. Despite threats and intimidation, she contacted Channel 5 News for an exclusive interview, revealing 8 years of documented corruption, with the calm authority of someone who'd finally found her voice. My husband died believing in this community's values, she told investigative reporter Sarah Chen, her hands steady as she displayed evidence files. Brenda Thornfield Arnfield turned Thower neighborhood into her personal bank account. The residents deserve to know the truth. The investigative team had been digging deeper, discovering connections between Brenda's scheme and 12 other Tennessee communities. Her cousin's development company had been running similar operations across the state, using HOA positions to funnel public money into private profits. Gerald's cooperation accelerated everything. His inside knowledge revealed shell company locations, offshore account numbers, and communication systems Brenda thought were secure. The man was dismantling his wife's empire with the precision of someone who'd been forced to watch it being built. Media attention reached critical mass when the story connected to broader investigations of municipal corruption. State legislators announced hearings on HOA oversight. Federal authorities began parallel investigations into interstate fraud patterns, but the most dangerous moment came when bank employees reported Brenda's attempt to withdraw $180,000 in cash, an amount that triggered automatic federal reporting requirements. When questioned about the withdrawal purpose, she became agitated and claimed family emergency, raising additional suspicions. The emergency HOA meeting was 8 hours away. Brenda had planned it as my public execution, but media trucks were already arriving in our neighborhood. Channel 5 News 2 and Nashville scene reporters were setting up equipment for what they'd been told was a major municipal corruption expose. Harold was released from the hospital that afternoon with strict instructions for stress management, but he insisted on attending the meeting in his wheelchair. Wouldn't miss this for anything, he said, his eyes bright with anticipation. The community center parking lot filled with residents, reporters, and unmarked police vehicles. As evening approached, Brenda Thornfield thought she was silencing her last opponent. Instead, she was walking into the biggest public humiliation of her life. The Willowbrook Community Center had never seen anything like this. Standing room only with over 200 attendees, including residents, media crews from 3 national stations, and plainclothes police officers who tried blending in but stood out like federal agents at a county fair. The air crackled with anticipation, mixing stale coffee smells with the electric tension of justice about to be served. Brenda arrived in a borrowed Honda Civic, her Lexus apparently already sold, wearing discount store clothes that made her look like a department store mannequin missing its designer outfit. Gerald was notably absent, having filed for divorce that morning and entered witness protection. She sat alone at the head table like a dethroned queen, her usual diamond studs replaced with costume jewelry that caught fluorescent lights like broken promises. Dorothy Vance positioned herself at the secretary's table, no longer the timid widow following orders. Her spine was straight, evidence folders stacked like ammunition, ready for the battle that would define our community's future. Tonight we address malicious allegations against this board, Brenda announced, her voice carrying familiar, artificial sweetness that now sounded like poison wrapped in silk. Despite coordinated harassment campaigns, HOA business must continue. I stepped to the podium with Dorothy beside me and Harold in his wheelchair, front row center, surrounded by supporters who suffered 8 years of her tyranny. Camera lights blazed as I connected my laptop to the projection system. Members of Willowbrook Estates, I began my voice, carrying across the packed room. Tonight you'll discover exactly how your HOA president transformed our neighborhood into her personal bank account. The first slide hit like a legal sledgehammer. Brenda's shell company and corporation papers, clear as courtroom evidence. The room fell silent, except for camera shutters clicking like metallic insects, and the nervous rustling of 200 people processing betrayal. Magnolia Holdings LLC Co. Owned by the Thornfields. Retained development rights to 5 lots when Willowbrook was founded. I explained each word, landing with prosecutorial precision. Every fee increase for 8 years was designed to inflate property values for her personal profit. The financial evidence was devastating. Systematic theft totaling $847,000. Spa visits billed as community meetings, luxury car maintenance charge as HOA expenses, family vacations disguised as board development. The timeline showed calculated greed spanning nearly a decade. But the smoking gun was audio recording of Brenda's attempted bribery, her voice unmistakably clear through the sound system. I'll give you $10,000 to make this disappear. Dorothy, think about your retirement. The crowd's reaction exploded, like a dam bursting. Mrs. Chen stood up, tears streaming. You stole my arthritis medicine. I suffered for weeks. James Rodriguez's military bearing couldn't hide his fury. You questioned our patriotism while robbing us blind. Brenda's meltdown was spectacular theater. Abandoning all pretense, she launched into the kind of elitist rant that destroys political careers and ends suburban dynasties. You people destroyed this community with your ignorance, she screamed. Her perfectly maintained facade cracking like cheap pain. You're too stupid to understand complex finances. You needed someone intelligent enough to manage your money properly. The smell of her desperation, expensive perfume mixing with fierce sweat, filled the front rows as she revealed her true contempt for the people she'd been systematically robbing. That's when Detective Maria Santos rose from the audience, like an avenging angel, her badge gleaming under media lights. Brenda Thornfield, you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, money laundering and filing false police reports, she announced, her voice cutting through the chaos like a legal sword. The clicking of handcuffs echoed through the silent room, like the closing of a coffin. Camera flashes exploded as Channel 5's crew captured every second of the perp walk. Brenda's head was down, the neighborhood queen reduced to just another criminal in custody, her empire crumbling in real time. Community catharsis erupted in spontaneous applause that built like thunder. Mrs. Chen hugged James Rodriguez. Kim Thompson live stream justice to social media. Dorothy sat quietly, 8 years of fear finally lifting from her shoulders. Harold rolled to the microphone, his voice strong despite recent hospitalization. Sometimes communities must choose between comfortable lies and difficult truths. Tonight Willowbrook chose truth. Tennessee Attorney General Representative Michael Chang addressed the crowd. The state will recover all stolen assets and ensure full restitution. This investigation has revealed similar schemes in 12 other Tennessee communities. My final statement became the mic drop moment that defined everything. Brenda Thornfield forgot that, in America, we don't bow to suburban dictators. She stole packages, but, more importantly, she stole our sense of security. Tonight we took back our neighborhood. As police cars disappeared with our former tormentor, residents streamed outside into cool evening air that smelled like freedom instead of fear. Media trucks prepared broadcasts that would make Willowbrook synonymous with community courage rather than HOA corruption. The woman who'd started by stealing my father's insulin had just discovered that some neighborhoods don't just fight back, they win. 6 months later, the Willowbrook Community Center had been renamed the Harold Holloway Transparency Center, in honor of my father's courage during our darkest hours. The bronze plaque by the entrance reads, dedicated to the principle that communities thrive in sunshine, not shadows. Harold insisted the honor belonged to Dorothy, but the community vote was unanimous. 322 residents, 0 opposition. The legal resolution exceeded our wildest expectations. Brenda received 18 years in federal prison with mandatory 12-year minimum before parole eligibility. Gerald's cooperation earned him 3 years probation and permanent dental license revocation, but he avoided prison. The developer cousin was banned from Tennessee construction and faces federal charges in 3 other states where similar schemes were discovered. Most importantly, full restitution was ordered. $1.4 million, including penalties and interest, recovered from frozen assets, luxury item sales and insurance settlements. Every Willowbrook resident received refund checks averaging $3,200, money stolen through inflated fees, over 8 years of systematic fraud. The recovered funds created something beautiful, the Willowbrook Community Foundation. This nonprofit now provides college scholarships for local students pursuing public service careers, operates a senior care assistance fund for elderly residents, and hosts annual Transparency Day celebrations featuring free legal aid clinics for HOA disputes statewide. Harold's health not only recovered but flourished once stress lifted. He now leads morning walking groups for neighborhood seniors. His medication routine stabilized, and spirits higher than I'd seen since Mom died. The man falsely accused of elder abuse became our community's most beloved grandfather figure, dispensing wisdom with southern charm and unshakable integrity. My business expanded beyond dreams, specializing in cybersecurity, consulting for municipalities and HOAs across Tennessee. Positive media attention brought clients wanting the guy who exposed suburban corruption to protect their digital infrastructure. Harold jokes that Brenda accidentally made us wealthy by trying to destroy us. Dorothy was elected treasurer in a landslide, running the most transparent board in state history. Monthly financial meetings are open to all residents, every transaction documented and published online in real time. Her late husband would be proud. Their community finally embodies the values he believed in. The ripple effect amazed everyone. Tennessee passed the Accountability Act, requiring annual independent audits for all homeowner associations. 23 other states introduced similar legislation. FBI training programs now use our case as the primary example for municipal corruption detection. Our package solution was elegantly simple: a secure community room in the Transparency Center, managed by rotating volunteers, with 24/7 monitoring, accessible to residents online. 0 thefts in 6 months. And delivery drivers love the centralized system that protects everyone. Property values increased 15%. Due to our reputation for stability and genuine community spirit. Real estate listings now highlight corruption-free, with proven transparency as major selling points. The waiting list for available houses stretches 40 families deep. People want neighbors who stand up for each other. Personal healing surprised me most. The bitter divorce that drove me to Willowbrook had perfectly prepared me for this fight. My ex-wife's forensic accounting lessons, legal knowledge from custody battles, even emotional resilience built through personal crisis, everything contributed to our community's salvation. Kim Thompson and I started dating, building a relationship on shared values rather than suburban convenience. Harold became surrogate grandfather to her children. Our blended family, gathering for Sunday dinners that smell like home cooked love instead of stress-induced desperation. The media legacy continues growing. Documentary crews followed our story for an investigative series, premiering next month on municipal corruption nationwide. We've become symbols of what communities can accomplish when neighbors refuse to accept abuse from petty tyrants. But the most satisfying moment came last week. An email with familiar desperation from Florida. "We have HOA corruption. Can you help?" Attached footage showed board presidents taking contractor kickbacks, residents facing fabricated fines, systematic intimidation of questioners. Dorothy volunteered investigation assistance. Harold insists on joining. Road trip for justice sounds perfect, son. These old bones still have fight left. His final wisdom echoes daily. Sometimes the best gift you give your community is refusing to stay silent when you witness wrongdoing. Share your story, drop a comment, and tell me your worst HOA horror story. Are you dealing with power-hungry board members? Have you discovered financial irregularities? Your story might give someone else courage to act. Subscribe to HOA Stories. If this journey from package theft to community justice inspired you, smash that subscribe button for HOA Stories and ring notifications. Next week, HOA president banned my American flag until I found his tax evasion scheme. Remember, transparency isn't just good government, it's neighbors protecting neighbors, one stolen package at a time.